Good morning. Should we start?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. We don't need a motion to start on this one, do we?
Yep. No, why don't we don't?
No.
Just fire away.
Yep.
So.
All right, well, good morning. This is our third roundtable related to potential IPL charter, IPL governance related charter changes. So you have in your email a red line version and a clean version of changes that were accepted by the council at the last meeting. Really, we have two outstanding issues that we need to deal with, and those are the composition of the board, who's eligible to serve on the board, and economic development and what is allowable from an economic development with utility funds. So rather than those changes, since those were the two big issues of debate, Lindsay has created a standalone document that you have also in that same email. It's the Board of Public Utilities member compensation and eco-devo options is the title of the document. So I will let I will let Lindsay kind of, I guess, kick off this conversation. Just to note, again, being a resident of the state is a constitution requirement that for the composition of the board. So I know we talked about out of town, so that kind of does limit at least to state boundaries as a kickstart for that piece. And then there was question about whether large projects, economic development projects would come before the council. And just keep in mind when we talk about that piece that the council is the only group that is allowed to approve incentives. So regardless of whether it goes before the board for approval, it would still have to come to council either way if incentives are involved. So those are kind of two of the guiding components of the discussion today, but I will let you.
Sure. I thought we could start just quickly. Are there any questions on any changes that were made not on composition or economic development? There were a few sections that we moved up towards the document and some changes there. Any concerns there?
I actually had a question real quick, and maybe a statement. So I know that in the original document that the previous city manager put forward, it removed the portion that in the power line had to be used, had to be run like a business, or however that was worded. And then there was some discussion, I believe, I don't know if it was a study session or somewhere amongst the council, and I thought we had agreed to put that back in. And maybe I'm misremember, I don't really know. And then last month you said that it was out. So is it in or out at this point?
That language, the business-like manner, is currently out, but this is a draft, so we can include it if that is the desire.
Personally, my statement is I think it needs to be in there.
But run like a business-like manner?
Yes.
And does it need to also include, I thought we had discussed, running a business-like manner for the benefit of the residents of Independence? Was that?
However it was
not
worded
remembering
before, I think it needs to stay
Okay.
in there like that. Otherwise, I'm personally against it, and I think if it stays out, we're going to have a hard time getting it at an election.
let me find that language, I want to have the exact language so we all know. The municipally owned and operated electric system is a public utility and shall be operated in a business-like manner. That's just one sentence. And then the next one is that the electric utility shall not be operated for the benefit of other municipal functions, which is the struggle with using it with economic development. So we can keep the business-like and remove the other municipal functions if that's something you want to do.
Well, the business like that, I definitely sustain that.
So that would
Under,
read-
under the amended, so like section 3.24, funds and accounting of the electric utility, it still has the statement about the electric utility shall not be operated for the benefit of other municipals. We could add the shall be ran in a business-like manner right there, since it seems to kind of coincide with where that language sits already.
Well, and the reason that hadn't been formally added back in yet was because we were having this economic development discussion, and so that was part of the draft language to see where it ended up and in what form we finalized that language.
Do we feel like that precludes us having EcoDevo?
So right now, it's in section 3.24, it's the electric utility shall not be operated for the benefit of other municipal functions except for as provided in the charter. So we're including in the charter those economic development provisions, so we would be allowed to use it there.
I have no objection to that.
Business-like manner.
Do you want that deep in the document, or do you feel like you want that higher up in
As
the?
long as it's in the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so business-like manner, adding back in. Any other questions, concerns, clarifications? Okay, then we can jump to composition of the Board of Public Utilities. So you have a few provisions laid out on that document, just for your awareness, current city provisions, and then also, like Lisa mentioned, the Missouri Constitution, that these members will need to be at least living within the state. So I have a couple different options on the next page, just different things to think about. And so if anybody has any thoughts, concerns with any of those. And keep in mind, right now, the draft says 6 members would be in town, 1 would be out. That is totally up to your change still.
So where did we end up on the 7 or 9 discussion? I thought we were going to put something in that says 7, but if we wanted to, we could raise it to 9 down the road.
We could say, right now it says the Board of Public Utilities shall consist of 7 persons. We could say the Board of Public Utilities shall consist of at least 7 persons, but no more than 9. And then when we refer to a quorum, rather than saying X amount of members must approve something, we just say the majority of the members, so whatever that number is. But it should be 7 or 9, not 8. We should not have an equal number, so, but we can work in our language.
Yeah, I think that we ought to have that flexibility if we can. I don't see any negative to that.
I would just throw out there that a couple of the one main negative is that if you don't have it set, then sometimes there's confusion about how many members there are, and obviously a quorum depends on how many members you have, and so if it's not set there, then essentially you have to go back to minutes to figure out, okay, are we, in this case, it's not a huge range, but, are we at 7 or are we at 9? And so it's just, it makes it more important that it's clear along the path that exactly how many you have and where, who those seats are, because if it's not a set number, sometimes there gets to be confusion, and then it's suddenly, well, we thought this was a vacancy. Nope, that we moved it back to, it was 9, but we moved it back to 7 because we couldn't fill the seats, and sometimes there's back and forth. And again, if it's not set somewhere, then you're relying on the minutes of, of meetings in order to go back and fix that. And, and somebody's like, well, I thought it was going to be this. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I would say that is a con to not having it as a set number.
I thought our plan was, or what we discussed was to put that language in here, and then in the ordinance where we appoint people to stipulate that it was 7 at the present and could be changed, at some date in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, as the revenue grew and it became a bigger organization,
Right.
then it was to allow the flexibility to go up to 9, but start by seating 7 because there were still are concerns with just eligibility and who will serve and all the things in starting this new board.
And something else to keep in mind too, I know we've talked about we want to have the most qualified people. This board can still have consultants and independent contractors that can give it advice too. So we don't have to rely on, we need to have those people on the board. We can still have relationships with those types of people and entities and understand from them as well in other capacities.
So just my opinion, I think it needs to be a set number. Whether, I prefer 9, but if it's 7, it needs to be set. And because if somebody's not getting their way, hey, let's add some more members, like you always hear, we're going to stack the Supreme Court, I think we could have that exact same thing in the city. Because if we don't get what we want, let's just add some more members.
So the council appoints each member, right? So if there's 9, if there's 7 council.
We have not discussed how the council would appoint them, but that is a thing to consider as well.
I think we had that would be recommended by the board, and vacancies would be recommended by the board.
Yes,
Yeah,
my
it wasn't like the
apologies.
PUAB where you get a selection and you get it was recommendations would come up from the board, and as a council body,
Okay.
you would approve those
Okay.
members to the board.
Yes.
But we have the ability to recommend people for them to consider as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are we going to draw straws?
How many people are strongly in favor of 7?
I think 7 is a good number to start with, and the ordinance to have the flexibility to go to 9 as things go, because that will have to be discussed amongst the body and then brought forward. I mean, this body is going to be a different form of a body governance that the city has not seen before on the level of professionalism. Not to say the PUAB is not that, but this is going to be a different realm.
So are we, I just want to be sure I understand, but do we need that in the charter to say the board will consist of 7 to 9 people with the city council establishing an ordinance for the number at that particular time? Or that just happens by practice? I just am trying to understand how that happens.
What if we provide that the Board of Public Utilities shall consist of 7 persons, blah, 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 blah. Next section, if at any time the city council deems more members are necessary, they could go up to 9 by ordinance. So we have ordinance, we have record that they would go to 9. It wouldn't be an arbitrary.
By the recommendation of the board, I mean, the council
sure.
shouldn't unilaterally make that decision without their recommendation.
And I wouldn't say go up to 9, because that sounds,
To 9 members.
yeah, we go
That would
to,
allow for 8.
right.
Yeah, that
Because
would
I'm
allow for 8.
that way.
May expand to 9 members.
Right, right.
And to your point, Bryce, we still, I mean, what we're talking about is changes to the charter, which are more difficult and have to go to a vote of our citizens. And I think what you're talking about is something that can be handled by the city council as we see needed by ordinance, right? Yeah, I mean, if we see that there's an issue, then we take it to the dais and talk about what's happening and vote on it.
I think it needs to be set number in the charter, and I'll just leave it at that.
Are you concerned that, I'm just trying to figure out, if a majority of the council decided to increase it, you're concerned about a hostile takeover of the board?
Yeah.
Okay. But if you add 2 people, it still isn't a voting majority.
It could change the voting majority.
That's true.
I also just think that adds a lot of confusion.
I tend to agree, and I'm not trying to be argumentative with anyone here. I think we should set it. Either we pick 7 or we pick 9. I don't care which number, and I'm fine with PUAB recommending it and we pick them and they vote on it. I'm not concerned with that, but I truly believe we should pick a number and make it clean, because we saw with the complaints we had with the last charter votes, people complaining about complexity. And if just one more nuance of complexity makes it difficult. Simplicity, I think, will help us in this cause. That's my thought on it. 7, and we move on. But I certainly defer to the group. I'm just one voice.
Here's a suggestion, and for the end of the conversation today, this suggestion is once we get something locked down here, we don't conclude the roundtable. We kick it off to our friends at the PUAB to hold a public engagement meeting and get some feedback from there, and then have one more roundtable for an hour or less to solidify that input for the document. So I'm either way, 9 or 7, just for conversation purposes, get the feedback and solidify. I certainly don't want to go more than that, for darn sure.
Yeah. It just
Why
gets
not
too
15?
I worked with a CEO that
21.
worked for, he had 18 board members and he loved it. And I said, why is that? He goes, they can't agree to fire me because they can't agree on lunch. So anyway, that's enough said. Are we good with John's suggestion of allowing that to be kind of an open discussion with the PIB and have it, and then giving this some feedback of what they hear, and then they can certainly make a recommendation too on what they think we should do with it and go from there.
What do you think, Bryce? Okay.
And is that, we're sticking with 7 right now, and then we'll see what the feedback is?
If you see what the feedback is from the PUAB, but
I don't know what information you're gonna get from that, just being the anti,
Okay.
you have 7 opinions already.
Sure.
So open it to the public, you're gonna have endless opinions, and how do you filter that down to make a decision?
Right.
I kind of think that's why you're elected officials, to make decisions. I mean, I think you're gonna have as many opinions as you do across this table, and I don't know that you're gonna land on a solid number unless you take some kind of public vote and see if it's 7 or if it's 9 or 11. I think it's just tough to, I'm just kind of being, throwing that out there a little bit. It's just tough, right?
I actually look forward to conversation at PUAB about the document once I make it to them, but I'm okay with going with 7. If that matters, that makes the decision, and it's one thing that's done. It solves the issue of too big a board for you. I'm okay.
I'm okay with that too, but getting that, and you're right, Joe, there will probably be as many opinions as staff here. And us as elected, is our responsibility to at least kick it out to our constituency that are going to vote on this for the future of your power plant, to have an input. And if there's an impasse because of too much controversy, you're right, we are the elected officials and we will make that decision at that time.
Understood.
Okay, any other thoughts before we move on? So composition then, right now we have 6 in-town members and 1 out-of-town member. That of course can change, but we have not solidified what in-town and out-of-town mean. You have a few different examples on from the current city charter and just a few different options on that page. As a reminder, the city charter currently requires boards and commissions created by the charter to be registered qualified voters of the city and to have resided within the city for at least 1 year prior to appointment. And of course, we're changing the charter so we can change that, but that's what is currently in place for members of boards and commissions.
You're not saying we would change that element of the charter? You're
No,
saying
just
we
for
would-
this board.
Right, that's what I thought, so.
So for all their boards, it would stay consistent the way it is now.
Yes. This
And
one
we
would
would
just
make
be.
an exception for this board for that one position.
Yes.
And alternative language included.
In alternative language, for in-town members, they could just reside within the city. It could be that simple. They could be registered qualified voters of the city. It could be that they are required to own real or personal property within the city. We talked about renters would not be able to participate if they were required to own real property, but if we also required personal property, they would, if they had a car, generally would probably be more available to serve. We've also talked about having applicable business or professional experience, so not just narrowing that down to utilities, but generally other business and professional experiences. We could also include that the requirement that they have resided within the city for at least 1 year immediately prior to appointment. That is fairly a common one. If we require them to reside, they have also done so within the year previous. We have also talked about that they shall be a customer of the electric utility or reside in a property that is a customer of the electric utility, which also would cover renters and people who do not actually are not themselves customers of the utility, but still use it.
And if we go complicated with this, I'm of the opinion if they're a registered voter in the City of Independence and they're recommended by PUAB, they're good enough. Because the thing is, we're going to have PUAB recommend these people. So
Board of Public Utilities,
Okay.
two different boards.
Okay.
Right.
But they'll be recommended by the board, right? So they're going to be individuals that have risen to the level where their peers would, am I saying it correctly?
Well, so the council will have to seat the first board
Right,
because there would be no recommending body
Right.
at that point. So
Right.
this first round, it really matters for, those recommendations will be coming from you.
right. But still, for us as elected officials not going to recommend somebody to a board who would embarrass them by their
Correct.
appointment.
Yeah.
And my point is, if we just make it simple for charter language, because I'm just really sensitive to the point of how much we got criticized the last time with the complexity of our language. If it's just a registered voter in Independence, I'm good with that, because then we would do the vetting of those individuals based on their relationships, their professional background, their professional experience, those kinds of things. If we put those additional criteria in there, it just gives people an additional item to shoot at when they want to vote the charter down. But I'm certainly open to suggestions from you. I could be looking at it wrong, and I'm open to other viewpoints.
So if we simplified it to registered voter and/or a customer of the utility, does that work?
Yeah, that would work. I mean, because that'll allow business owners or people that,
So that would mean if they're a registered owner, a registered voter, and then we do have Evergy in this town, it's not Independence residents have Evergy, is that right?
Yes, we have some border codes.
So they wouldn't be eligible, even if they're a registered voter. I want to make sure we're clear.
What
Well,
about
it says-
or?
Wait a minute, it says registered voter and/or customer.
Oh,
of the
and
utility.
or, okay.
Yes.
And that could be, you could say and, or you could say or. That's why I put and or there, because you guys can pick that also. So
Right.
I would say registered voter or customer of the electric utility is what I hear.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
So that means they don't have to be a registered voter.
Correct, but then they would have to be a customer of the electric utility.
and that would allow folks like managers of Hy-Vee or things like that to serve on the board, if I'm hearing you correctly.
It is. I do think that also gets a little bit complicated who, owns the business, who's in charge of it. The manager of Hy-Vee doesn't own it,
Right.
but that can be something also that the council can work on via ordinance to help
Right.
clarify those things.
So essentially, you could say, yeah, again, I think it's right that you can, again, put some of the more meat on the bones in the ordinance, but essentially it could be, the customer or the representative or their designee or something like that in order
I
to,
like that.
in order to.
Representative of the customer.
Right, so I mean, you can't, Hy-Vee, if, assuming that, Hy-Vee is the the account holder, obviously Hy-Vee can't, isn't a person who can't vote, but they can choose who would be that person.
But I think that goes in the ordinance.
I would agree, yeah, I agree,
Charter.
absolutely.
Thank you for saying that.
My inclination is to just leave it at registered voters. My thinking there, and so challenge me on this, my thinking there is if they don't care enough to be registered to vote, then why do we want them on a board like this? I mean, now maybe there's reasons to not be registered, I'm not sure, but I mean, it's just part of being a good citizen.
Sure.
This is my thinking. So that's why I would just leave it at just that, I think.
Conceptually, it's just to allow the business owner's side to participate.
But that would be for out-of-town people, right?
Well, but,
I mean,
well, and I just want to, the in-town and out-of-town requirements just come from an example of the Springfield Board of Public Utilities. We don't have to do it that way. We can
Right.
just say 7 members who are either registered voters or customers of the electric utility. That is also an option.
Which is probably cleaner.
It's a little simpler. If we're talking simple, just saying you are a registered voter or a customer of the electric utility simplifies that all a little bit.
so let me push back on that a little bit, and that you could then have a board with that language of 7 people that don't live in the city of Independence,
Who are
Unless you
all
said it in
who are all
customers.
customers.
Unless you set it by
Unless you
ordinance,
covered
you would
that
say
in the ordinance as well.
a certain number will be residents or
Yeah.
voters, you can set that by ordinance as well.
Or
Can we
you can
put
set
in
by
the
ordinance,
charter?
registered voters have to be such, number of registered voters. The reason I like the language of allowing I just get beat up by the school district and Hy-Vee. I go to Hy-Vee, I can't tell you the number of times the manager goes, we pay the highest rates of any store in our entire Hy-Vee universe. And I get beat up on that. Or the school district, I'm sure, is beat you up on that. They need representation, on this. Now, of course, with the data center coming on board and the completely shift last night, and I really appreciate last night when you said the ratio difference. That was so helpful. But with that ratio difference, I think that's going to help our business. We can and the future councils can look at what's the mix there. But I really think they need to be on this board so they have a voice with their rates, because I just get beat up all the time. And I don't know if anybody else in the council does, but man, I just get waylaid. And so that's just me talking about the beating I take with regards to it. And I'm sure you do too, Joe. I mean,
I've heard it a few times.
yeah. And so that's why I think they should have the opportunity to be on there, because they do pay, our business owners, how much of the total freight do they pay of IPL as a ratio?
Well, so right now, they're 50% of the revenues.
Okay. So that's why I'm saying that. Somebody who pays that much of the freight of a company should have some bit of a voice on the board.
And I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that under the language that Lindsay just talked about,
Mhm.
you could potentially have no members, no residents.
Absolutely.
Theoretically.
Right.
Not likely.
Right.
I don't think, I mean, it just only gets likely, but it's theoretical.
Absolutely.
And so,
Do you want to say that a majority of members must be residents of Independence? And that way you're
I kind of like that language, and then if you say the majority, I'd be good with that.
I think a supermajority.
But again, I'd like to do the majority inside the ordinance. Let's work on an ordinance that we write that's.
Oh, we can change that anytime.
Right.
The charter's the guardrails to keep us safe, and to me, this is where the basics are. I say the majority reside in Independence gets you at least protected from Jared's concern.
Mhm.
And then maybe in the ordinance, you can say applicable business, professional, and personal experience to, you can put some more of those specifics in the ordinance.
Okay. If we write it that way, could you read it back to us so we hear it?
Sure, and I know we're saying majority, I would go with the number, just so that that's clear too. So 4 members would be registered voters, and 3 would be required to be customers of the electric utility.
Or 3 could be.
And I think we would need to break it down to, so that we understand which members are which, because I don't want it to say there are 4 members who are required to be registered voters and 3 who are customers, and then 4 people are registered voters and customers, and then we
But
don't
that's
have,
okay.
yeah.
But as long as 4 members, he just wants them to live here. By definition, if they live here, they're customers, right?
Right.
So,
Okay. So yes, 4 would be registered voters, 3 would be required to be customers, but not be registered voters. 3 could be customers, but not registered voters.
so the simplified language would be, they must be registered voters or customers of the utility with a minimum of 4 being registered voters. Then that solves your problem, right? Could be a maximum of 7. We're just making sure that there's a minimum
At least
number of
4.
voting members who live here.
Does that work?
And you could say reside in Independence, you could do it however you want, but I think it belongs in the charter.
All registered voters or customers with at least 4 being required to be registered voters.
Okay.
Does that work? Okay, I think that's kind of it on composition. We have also talked about the requirement that they have professional or business experience, but that, I think I heard would go in ordinance. Is that understood? Okay. Okay, anything else on composition before we jump to economic development?
We didn't talk about compensation at all.
It is currently that they've received no compensation except for regular expenses.
Right. This probably will be, I would think, would be the most active board that we would have, maybe with the exception of the planning commission potentially. I don't know. I don't have that strong preference. I just, somewhere I saw it in the document that, about compensation, so I just recognized we had talked about that.
Well, Bridget, you mentioned in a previous meeting, if we stayed silent on the issue, we could do it later on. What if we stayed silent on the issue?
We could say they receive no compensation except for as provided by the council. Or we could say, or be silent. If we're silent, then there's a question as to whether they do or don't. But we could say they receive no compensation except for as provided by council, or compensation as provided by council, something like that.
So we could change it at some point if we want.
Could you, instead of talking about compensation, say that they can be reimbursed for allowable expenses? Doesn't say anything about compensation, but it makes sure that they know that they aren't out of pocket to be on this board if we ask them to go to,
To a conference or something like
Yeah,
that, they could.
And it does include that necessary expenses language now that that's allowed. And that whole section on compensation is a holdover from the Springfield ordinance, so we can change that too. But if we say they can't serve without any compensation, then the council is
Right.
stuck.
I know we can't afford to pay them now, but at some point, if we should, I
Yeah.
wouldn't mind giving them something.
Some token, you know, yeah, that was my thought.
So I would like to be able to put it,
I'd like to be able to, by ordinance, change that in the future if we wanted to, you know, kind of a thing. That would be my preference, I guess.
Then it would say something like, all members of the board shall serve for compensation as may be provided by the council. Necessary expenses would be reimbursed. And that's just my off-the-cuff language, it would be cleaned up a little bit, but, okay? Okay. Anything else on the makeup of the board? Okay, economic development. So economic development, Lisa mentioned this at the start, there is a lot of incentives that do require approval by ordinance. So TIFs, Chapter 100s, those are still required to be approved by ordinance. So the council would have to approve those. There's no option to give it to another board. But there are a couple options. So first, if we do want the Board of Public Utilities to be involved generally with economic development projects, I would suggest they should be concerned with electric utility rates, sales or leases of IPL property, and then electric utility infrastructure. If we have a project that has nothing to do, there's no electric infrastructure necessary for that project, Board of Public Utilities wouldn't have any say over that. One thing that we could think about is the Board of Public Utilities being more of a recommending body, like a TIF commission. You could put in different triggers for different projects. Like, for example, the TIF commission, if the TIF commission recommends denial of a project, then the council must, if the council approves the project, we can only reimburse for like demolition expenses. All those other expenses that we want to incentivize can no longer be available. That's something that you could also think about with this board. And I mean, keep in mind, you would be putting restrictions on your own board, right? So that's maybe something we do or don't want to do, but I would suggest that it's a recommending body. And if we want to consider some triggers as to what will happen if they recommend denial, we can think about that. But I would suggest
Supermajority of council votes.
something like that, yeah.
Like to.
And those are hardships you're putting on yourselves, but that's something that we can think about.
So the TIF commission is set by state statute.
Yes.
So, okay.
And the TIF commission also has city members, but from the school board, the county, and other taxing jurisdictions too. This would be city and electric utility customers.
So just on here, I'm just going to ask a question about language. Because we use pilot in so many different ways, and you've included the word pilot in this, just think perhaps about a different vocabulary word to not confuse the world. I get it, it's in lowercase. And on item 4, engaging in pilot programs or rate structures designed to stimulate redevelopment, innovation, or targeted industry. I'm just saying, let's not.
Engaging in initiatives.
Fine. So I want to come back to the postulate you had before about should this board recommend against an incentive program, this council would have to have a supermajority to do that. What about the flip side? If they make a recommendation, does it come to us, or do they make the recommendation and it changes right at the level of the board without ever crossing the council?
So I would suggest that generally, sort of like the TIF commission, we have a proposal, the council probably has a term sheet, we understand what we're working for, and then at that stage, before it can go to the council at all, the Board of Public Utilities would have to review the incentive and make one of those applications. But they would only have recommending powers, so they could recommend that the board approve it with X, Y, and Z, or I'm sorry, they could recommend that the council approves it with X, Y, and Z, then the council can consider that, or the council cannot, because you are still the ultimate authority.
Okay, so that was my question. It still comes to us.
Yes, that would be my recommendation, that they don't have the stop power for approval or denial.
So does that need to go back into the powers of the city council? I guess it's already there. Approve all rates and fees related to public utilities. Do you think that covers it? Okay.
I do, and I think that's something also that we will further illustrate in ordinance for the process of how it gets to the board and then the city council.
Okay.
I would structure it a lot like TIF commission, except for the 45-day notice that we have to put out. That we can reduce that, but that it goes to the commission, and then within a week or two, it goes to the council for their review.
And is that for all economic development?
That's what I would, if it involves electric utility rates, sales or leases of IPL property or electric utility infrastructure, it would go in front of the Board of Public Utilities, which is my suggestion. We can change that.
So that's basically everything.
It depends. You may not have a project, if a project is going in, like, I'm not privy to the details of the Wally's TIF, but if Wally's is just going to go in and put their transformer down and light up, then no, there's no real involvement with the electric utility. If the city is going to, like with the data center project, and I don't know the details of that one either, but if, the city is going to be working on some Chapter 100s or things like that, then that would go to the Board of Public Utilities.
So the spirit of my thought was not to add a level of scrutiny like we had with the board, the incentive board that we rolled back because it was an extra level of a meeting that everyone had to attend. So my spirit of the conversation was more of, if we have this area over here that needs to be revitalized here, and we got the parameters and boundaries, can we preemptively use IPL to go get not complete site ready, but to get utility set ready for future development preemptively? That was my thought. I don't want to add another layer of bureaucracy, if you will, if
Right.
somebody wants to come in and do something.
So does IPL spend funds to go revitalize Nolan Fashion Square and make it ready for commercial use again, to go out for economic development growth? And
Without connecting to a
without-
larger project, just we're looking forward
And we're looking forward, and is that, and you're saying that?
Yes.
That type of thing, and then who gives that permission? Is that council or is that this board?
So, yeah, so that's more my thought. I mean, in conjunction, and when you say site ready, I would say probably building demo, utility relocated in more of an area that would be prominent for enhancement for economic growth. So, yeah, because you can't do that now.
Right.
Or you wouldn't do that now.
Right.
And not to say that we would do that, but I want the potential for future councils to be able to use this as we're developing areas. I mean, particularly on the west side of town, where redevelopment is certainly going to have to take place a lot to uplift the greenfield development that's taken place. So we've got to get that balance. So that was the spirit.
Yeah, can we, I'm with John, like, if we have to Mother May I every decision, then that isn't the point of this.
Right, that's right.
Is it possible to say, it comes to the council, if not other provided by policy or ordinance, or like we set the parameters in ordinance that say, these are the things that are acceptable. They can modify fees within 10%. They can, do those sorts of things. Then they have the permissions to do the things that don't require coming back to us. Anything that's like, doesn't pass the sniff test, or boy, this is really out of the realm of the ordinary, I want to talk about that at the
Right.
council level. If
Yeah.
this is the mechanism of doing regular business, then those are the things that this board is supposed to be
That's what we want them
empowered
to
to
do,
do.
Yeah.
So you want them to manage the operational expenditures, so the CapEx and things like that, but incentive programs and anything based
Better.
in that world and development would need to come to you. Is
I
that-
think there
is
are
that how I'm
probably
interpreting that?
parameters that we
That's
can
what I'm
put, that
hearing.
as long as you're operating within these guardrails, you can do those things, but as soon as you step outside of those, we need a hand.
Yeah, I go, yes.
Yeah.
This may be too cumbersome, what we're doing here, and I certainly don't want to overburden anything that adds another layer of stuff we don't need.
Well, like Tom just said, anything that's a redevelopment project is going to touch infrastructure. And so if by default, that's what the council wants to discuss, and you just don't want to be hammered with we're spending $2 million to work on a combustion turbine, or we're doing this study, our typical already approved in the budget capital plan. Those don't need to come back to you. The council has already approved the budget document, so the board reviews those items. So can we just make that distinction of operational versus development?
And am I understanding that right now, you would not be able to go out and, because of the other municipal functions language in the charter?
Couldn't go out and do what specifically?
Like go out to Nolan Fashion Square and prep up for electric there. You couldn't do that because of the other municipal functions
You could modify
language?
the electric infrastructure, you couldn't demo a building.
I couldn't demo a building, not unless there was
Because-
a payee for the project, could I alter the infrastructure?
Right.
Because I
Couldn't
agree
do
that,
it just in prep to hope you
Yeah.
attract business, right?
Today, yeah.
And that's a different thing. But then, on the flip side, I think about running distribution lines down Little Blue that's not feeding particular buildings, but for future growth, right? That's economic development, but that's a project. So would that come to council or not?
I think what I'm hearing is no, because that would be capital improvement that's in the
I
budget.
thought it
If the
would be a
budget's
budgeted
approved,
capital.
Yeah.
if the budget's approved, then those items are approved. And like we've been saying, that is exactly what the board is for.
Okay.
It's if we're going to, if we want to sell property or discount electric infrastructure, that would go through the Board of Public Utilities. If the electric department is going out and saying, we're prepping for economic growth, we're gonna lay these lines, that's just a capital improvement that we're working on.
System expansion
Yes.
or replacement or upgrade, that's.
Standard
that's
capital project.
CIP.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that track for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. It's more so if we're selling IPL property, if they're getting a discount on their rate, if they're getting a discount on infrastructure that they are normally required to pay for themselves, that would go through Board of Public Utilities. And that's more, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's more so, a developer would be here, we'd be talking to the developer. If there's no developer, that's more so the electric department going out and expanding
I think
themselves.
those are the things the council still wants to discuss.
Yes.
is Those,
Yes.
not, it wouldn't go to the Board of Public Utilities, those are the things that would go to council.
So this,
Okay.
The eco development
Okay, so the
pieces.
board would not have any,
well, so let me throw this scenario out, just close to a real world scenario, but not there yet by any stretch. If I have a place in Fairmont that needs restructuring for capital improvement and investment in the future, would I, with no developer in sight right now, would me as a council member be able to present this idea to the city council as a whole body? We discuss it and move it to you for recommendation for a plan of redevelopment in the future? How would this flow?
I think if you're keeping the economic development piece at the council level and talking about either rate discounts or altering existing structures or
Site
anything
rating
like that.
preparation.
Yes, that is beyond the realm of normal CIP, something that we would do as a system expansion or repair, replacement, anything like that. What I'm hearing is this body wants that to come to you for that discussion and not the board. And then the board would be reviewing all of the operational big expenditures. So the capacity agreements that are on the next agenda, the $2 million in turbine repair that you just approved at the last meeting, and all of those things. Because the council would have already approved that in the budget and the CIP document, it shouldn't have to come back to you. It goes to this board to review those expenditures, to make sure that purchasing policy is followed. That then goes to that board. And you have the higher level economic development incentive, modification of existing infrastructure beyond electric lines.
Sure. So I'm okay with that, because that would go with what Councilman Stewart was saying, running a business like Manor, because at some point, the IPL will benefit greatly from whatever is developed there, and thus so will the ratepayers as well. So I'm okay with that.
So would this body make a recommendation to us? So I'm saying we have this opportunity for Eli Lilly to come in and they're going to make their home base here. It'd be for us, 3,000 employees, huge industrial user. and we have the capacity. Let's live in that world. Will they make a recommendation to us? You know, we've looked at the finances of this plan, and we recommend a rate of XYZ for this large industrial user. And that comes to the council so that they've had a first pass at it.
So I think that's the discussion, is do we want to add that layer of, like John said, bureaucracy, or do we want to just, those things ascend straight to the council? That's the question. Because because ultimately a project like that will involve incentives. So it's going to come to the council regardless. So do you want that layer to have to go through another board for their approval and then come to council? Because if they don't recommend it, then do we need a supermajority of the council to approve it, or does it matter? Are there additional steps?
And then the incentives only requires a regular majority.
Right, and so, yes, are we creating an additional layer or not? Or do certain things just go to council?
And they can just recommend it without requiring any other decisions. They can just have a review power. That's okay.
Which is how we function with PUAB today. They're a recommending body. Council takes or doesn't take that recommendation. It doesn't change that you just need a simple majority going forward, but it was vetted through and provided a recommendation.
But what I'm hoping for is the people that are thinking about this frequently, I want them to say, this is a great deal for us, or hey, this puts our finances in a precarious position, or this incentive is wonderful, but it puts our infrastructure at risk because we can't handle X, Y, Z. I mean, part of the reason for their expertise is that they make recommendations to us, so we have the benefit of the wisdom of them thinking about this once a month.
And that's absolutely fine, and maybe we just write it in that they it's a recommendation that the council can take or leave. I mean, you
I
don't
just
say
don't want to
that.
skip them.
Okay.
Because, they're supposed to be the body that helps us so that we don't have to live and breathe utilities every day.
So they can review it, but it doesn't alter the voting requirements of the council.
Review and recommend, but it doesn't change.
Right. Just like the PUAB.
And that would be for electric utility rates, sales or leases of IPL property, and general electric infrastructure discounts. And that language will be adjusted, but that's the realm of that review.
I mean, I like the way it's written from the standpoint of, it says, such use includes but is not limited to, so it can, I can envision that there are things that could happen in the future that we aren't thinking of today, so it's not limited to those items, but it's generally, I mean, those are kind of give us a framework of things to think about. My concern is that we, at least the interpretation of what's in the charter now is limited us substantially from what, we would hope to be able to do relative to economic development. And so that was the whole purpose of this particular discussion and section, is to at least, I mean, not that we don't need boundaries, I'm not saying that, but that we create opportunity there as opposed to just restrict.
Okay, so the way that I am envisioning this is we have gotten rid of that no other municipal functions language. So the board, or the electric utility, has more flexibility to do those things. So we don't need to specify what they can do now because we've taken away their restriction. So then, the Board of Public Utilities can do capital improvement projects, X, Y, and Z, to expand the electric utility because we've removed that restriction, and those will be approved within the regular budgetary process. That's the whole point of the Board of Public Utilities. The council will still have review and approval of all of the economic development projects that the city considers. The Board of Public Utilities will only review electric infrastructure portions of projects.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, like we said, the process of how we get there can be an ordinance.
Right.
Meeting dates, things like that, so. Okay.
Big outline.
Yeah, any other questions, concerns?
So we do plan to take this to the PUAB and put this on the agenda. We meet on Thursday, actually. So we will go ahead and get this added to the
Thanks,
agenda to discuss. Got permission from the chair before the meeting. So we will get that on the agenda, discuss that, bring this back, bring those comments back to the council while Lindsay cleans up this language and gets a hopefully final draft, and probably reconvene as a roundtable one last time.
But did you say, maybe I missed it, did you say they were gonna do a public, something, get public input?
We can do a forum. We'll
yeah.
talk about it at the
Wasn't that
PUAB
the
meeting.
discussion in the
What I
past?
shared with city manager here before the meeting was not this meeting Thursday, but the next two. I was going to make an announcement this Thursday. We wanted to do kind of a public forum for people to come with questions, or we're going to talk about this governance issue, start the education process, and then we'd like to do some type of a forum where the public can come. We can talk to them about this to really start educating people and get them on board of what it means for the charter changes and for this new board and how they operate.
Right, okay.
So that's kind of
That
what
could be
we're
Good.
February.
Yeah, we could do February, March, whatever we want to do.
And then after that, and all those comments, with the final, hopefully close to finalized language, we
Right.
meet like this one more time probably, and officially adopt what we want to have on the ballot.
Yeah.
Sound like a plan?
I think from a timing standpoint, it would probably be, if we're going to ballot language, it would probably be wise for that to happen before the April election, only from a standpoint of, anybody new that would be coming in would be really, I think, hamstrung by not having all this discussion.
Sure. So if we do the forum in February, we can reconvene later in February,
Yeah.
get everything drafted, get you guys back together,
Okay.
have that document ready.
The ballot language too.
That would be brought forward at the next meeting, yes.
Good.
And I think everybody agrees keeping that as clean and clear and simple as possible as well, because again, lessons learned, right? So,
I think Blue Springs, their ballot language was good with their charter changes.
There were also very small changes. but-
Yes.
But yes,
They're, yeah.
they got to start with a smaller charter in general. So
Yes.
they have a little bit of an advantage.
They did have an advantage, but their language was good. Their ballot language was good, I
Yeah.
thought, and pretty clear.
Okay, any other questions, concerns?
You have what you need?
Yes, I think so.
Well, thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah,
thank you.
of course.
No, thank you.
And thank you all for all the work you did to bring us to speed and help us out with that. So thank you.
It's a big change. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we wrap up and we call this one adjourned?
How many pages does this work out to be?
7, I
So
think.
the first page will be deleted. 1, 2, 5, less than full 5 pages. The fifth page does not come to the end.
Good.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn. Or we didn't have formally called, so
No,
good.
Okay, sounds good.
Ready for it?
Okay.
Yeah, can we take 5?
Yes, yes.
I want to get out of here.
You do.
I do not want anything to see this next meeting.
Can't have that now, can we?
She's not here. Yeah, she's working from home today. She'll be at.